Where's Ripple and XRP going to be in 2 years? So take us into the future a bit. So we're in 2020, only for another month, thank God. Where is Ripple and XRP going to be in 2022, 2023?
Well, so let me speak for Ripple. It's kind of a continuation of all the things we're doing to build out RippleNet. There's still a lot of territory to cover, and within the customers that sort of are brought on, going deeper and deeper with those customers to increase those transaction volumes and the utility of that network. As far as again, XRP I think is more tied with Bitcoin and Ethereum and the general market as anything else. It's anybody's guess on where I won't even kind of venture an estimate on that. There's so many issues at play.
Hey everybody, it's Eddie from Tokyo. This is your cryptocurrency update from Japan, and that intro was Ripple's Chris Larsen from the LA Blockchain Summit held live virtually in 2020. And he was asked, where did he think XRP would be in 2022 and 2023? So Larsen expressed his opinions that investors should not expect ODL to influence the price of XRP. And according to his evaluation, XRP is more likely to be strongly correlated to Bitcoin and Ethereum rather than Ripple's ODL projects. Let's listen to Fidelity Digital. This is their monthly recap where the discussion drifts to how much Bitcoin needs to be for the miners to be in profit. This is a video from 7 days ago.
Basically, this difficulty regression model aims to average out the cost of producing a Bitcoin. And so if we pay attention to just the top portion here, this green line represents the Bitcoin price, and then the black line represents the cost to produce a Bitcoin. And so usually we find an equilibrium between the two, and these are always in flux. But currently we are, the price is trading above the difficulty regression model, which simply means that it's cheaper to produce Bitcoin.
I think most of you know that the Bitcoin halving will occur in 2024. This is going to bring a new price, as the miners will have to push up that value. Seeking Alpha, an analytics company, they expect a range from 60,000 to 80,000 in 2025 with a 75,000 baseline. So if XRP remains correlated to Bitcoin and Ethereum, I think we're going to see that price increase in the latter half of 2024. Now let's move to some really big news. I've been telling everyone that you have to watch stablecoins. And today, Coinbase took a stake in Circle. Circle is the company that's behind the USDC coin that's backed 1-to-1 with the US dollar. In addition to that stake, the stablecoin will also be integrated with 6 more blockchains. We're not sure which blockchains they are, but it was identified earlier in the year that Polkadot, Near, Optimism, and Cosmos are chains Circle had planned to add in 2023. And no doubt it's going to be added to the blockchain that Coinbase just started called Base. With PayPal coming to the market with a stablecoin, this competition is really heating up. There's a lot of work to be done because the USDC coin has lost in a tremendous amount of market cap this year. You can see that it's just fallen off the cliff. And as I broke the news on X today, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, their regulatory framework for stablecoins has been finalized. This framework will apply to the single currency stablecoins, one pegged to the Singapore dollar, and any of the G10 currencies. This framework aims to facilitate the use of stablecoins as a credible digital medium of exchange and as a bridge between the fiat and digital asset ecosystems. The Monetary Authority of Singapore invited comments to the framework of these stablecoins, and from my X Twitter feed, you can find the link where you can read those comments from Ripple, SBI, and Circle. I imagine that some of you are saying, well, if they're using the stable coins as a bridge between fiat, what is the point of XRP? Well, I think that XRP is still going to have an important role for the exotic fiat corridors. You're also going to see XRP emerge as a utility gas token. It is already a rewards token with the Root network run by Futureverse. And with the AMM, the automated market maker, hopefully soon, XRP underpins that DEX, and it should be a component to various DeFi schemes, both for retail and institutional investors. And of course, speculation, that always will play a part in increasing value, especially since we have the SEC clarity, which means there's going to be probably more financial instruments created. Those would be spot ETFs, multi-asset ETFs, and even crypto asset funds like the one that was derailed from SBI Holdings when the lawsuit emerged. I sent a shout out to Mr. Yoshitaka Kitao and asked him if he's going to get back on track with this. XRP was weighted 50%, and that is XRP that's locked up in an investment portfolio in a crypto asset fund. Before we hear from Brian Brooks on how to counter the dollar demise, I searched for verification or proof that there was a gold-backed currency announcement coming out of the BRICS summit. I couldn't find anything credible. The creator of the name BRICS is Jim O'Neill, and he slams the common currency as ridiculous. He's with the Chatham think tank. It is just one behind the Brookings Institute in terms of reputation ranking. Now, he told the Financial Times nothing has ever been achieved since they first started meeting, and creating a common currency for the 5 economies would be unfeasible. It's just ridiculous, he said in response to calls for a trading currency from the Brazilian president Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva and other politicians from the bloc. They're going to create a BRICS central bank? How do you do that? It's embarrassing almost. He often says to the Chinese policymakers, forget your endless historical battles and try to invite India to share the leadership on some big issues, because then the world might take you a bit more seriously. As you know, India has said they don't share any desire to have a common currency.
There's been plenty of headlines over the years heralding the demise of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency of choice, with certainly an increasing number of countries seeking out and looking at alternatives. Not to mention, of course, the rise of crypto and decentralized coins, as they're known, that don't rely on governments at all. Now, in 2001, US dollar assets represented nearly 73% of global bank reserves. Well, now that figure's fallen to around 58%, according to RBC Wealth Management. Now, some of that is down to diversification into currencies like the euro, for example. But also in play here are fears over stability, both political and economic. And we can also include perhaps the de facto weaponization of the dollar in recent months, cutting Russia from the financial system. Well, my next guest, Brian Brooks, advocates a digital dollar-backed stablecoin. He says think of it as a prepaid cash card not tied to a major institution like a bank. And in a recent op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, he called for guidelines and regulations. And that's exactly where the US seemed to be headed until House Democrats suddenly turned their backs on this bipartisan stablecoin bill. Now, Brian Brooks is a partner at Valor Capital Group. He was also briefly the CEO of Binance US, and he joins us now. Brian, fantastic to have you on the show. I want to talk about the op-ed clearly, but I also want to take a step back for my audience that may be even scratching their heads at this moment. Explain what a stable coin is and why you see benefits above and beyond the cash US dollar.
Well, Julia, thanks for having me and thanks for the question. You know, stablecoins sound funny because all of the language of the crypto world sounds funny, but the concept is really familiar, I think, to most of your viewers. The concept is just the modern internet iteration of things from past generations like traveler's checks, or as you say, prepaid cards. The concept is the holder of this instrument has something that is a claim on dollars deposited someplace, and that instrument can be traded and used for payments for goods and services, and the recipient can redeem that stablecoin for $1. So if you think back 50 years to when we used to take out traveler's checks, if you and I are old enough for that, the idea was you would purchase a book of traveler's checks and you could go anywhere in the world. And those traveler's checks, even though they weren't cash, would be accepted as cash because the recipient knew that somewhere American Express had dollars on deposits, and that was a way that people abroad could access the dollar system. Stablecoins are just different because they're native to the internet. They don't require an underlying bank account, and that's why they've become so important in countries where dollars themselves aren't readily accessible. Dollar equivalents that don't require a US bank account, that's kind of a big idea.
Yeah, and this is the basic point. And the crux of your op-ed is saying, look, we need to provide guidelines. We need to regulate these stable coins, allow them to flourish. And not only do they provide a benefit to perhaps global citizens around the world that have, for example, high inflation economies and are worried about their own currencies and the value of them, but it could also be beneficial to the United States at a time where questions are being asked perhaps about the stability of the US dollar, or at least the behavior perhaps of policymakers here. Explain that.
Yeah, that is exactly right. And I think the world that we live in today, you had mentioned the weaponization of the dollar. Governments around the world are fighting dollar dominance. And we've all grown up in a dollar-denominated world since World War II. We have a lot of luxuries and benefits that come from that fact. Lower borrowing costs, cheaper goods and services for people who hold dollars, and things that Americans enjoy every single day. Governments around the world, for political reasons, are trying to decouple from the dollar. The point about stablecoins is the citizens of some of these other countries don't want to decouple from the dollar, because for all of our problems, the dollar remains one of the most stable and most widely accepted currencies. So the concept is stablecoins are a way of allowing citizens of countries like Russia, India, Brazil, those kinds of places, to hold their assets in dollars and to maintain demand for our currency at a time when other governments don't want to do that.
I think a great example of this perhaps is Brazil and Argentina, because they're sort of looking at signing agreements with the Chinese government, which is a great example to boost the use of the Chinese renminbi. At the same time, you know, you have the citizens, and you're talking about separating the decisions of a government from that of citizens that are saying, look, actually, we'd quite like to hold US dollars. The distinction here between state and citizen is vital.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Julia. So I've spent some time in Brazil very recently with a group of bankers and a group of fintech and crypto founders who all say the same thing. You know, the recent government in Brazil is a more left-leaning government with generally more willingness to engage with China than the prior government. And you're seeing the kinds of things you're talking about, which never would have been heard of 10 years ago. The idea of doing a renminbi-denominated trade deal never would have been thought of 10 years ago. But the fact that it's within the realm of discussion today, that's the problem. And yet people on the ground in Rio and Sao Paulo, they want to hold dollars. That again is where stablecoins come in. It's hard for them to hold dollars because their banks won't support those kinds of accounts. But stablecoins make it possible for them to hold dollars in a wallet on the internet. That's the revolution I'm really talking about.
What we also saw in the last couple of weeks was a debt downgrade from the United States by one of the big rating agencies, and barely anything happened. And that wouldn't be the case if the United States didn't have the world's deepest, most liquid bond market and the US dollar being the world's reserve currency. It gives them a protection, I think, that other countries don't enjoy. You can understand those that might not really understand what's going on and look at this and say, hang on a second, developing, providing guidelines, regulating and promoting stable coins and other crypto, as an example, might detract from the use of the US dollar. Why is that a spurious argument, Brian?
Yeah, well, so Julia, I think there are a couple of reasons. I mean, first of all, it's important that people separate the concept of stable coins, which really just are an internet-enabled prepaid card, okay, from things like Bitcoin, which are an entirely different animal altogether. They have a different valuation framework. They trade more like stocks and bonds and less like cash assets than stablecoins do. But cryptocurrency blockchains are what enable stablecoins to be secure and to transact instantly on the internet. That's the first difference that's really important here. But the second and more important point, I think, is you're right. When the debt downgrade happened just a couple of weeks ago, not very much happened in markets, which is why a lot of people might think, who cares? This is not that big of a deal. And my answer to that is, 20 years ago, when the dollar was 73% of all reserve currencies, we had a big buffer. We were very clearly the asset of choice globally for any major transaction. We're now at just north of 58%. Somewhere between 58% and 50% is a rapid cliff that we will go over if we're not very careful. And so, yes, at 58%, we're still a solid enough currency to absorb those kinds of shocks. And, with the next fiscal cliff, depending on where it is, maybe we'll have enough buffer to survive that too. But we're getting awfully close to an edge that we should be worried about. And so anything that makes dollars more attractive, that increases the demand for dollars, is ultimately good for the role of the dollar in the system.
Yeah, and some fiscal prudency perhaps too, but that's another conversation. Okay,
Good
so
luck.
why, yeah, good luck with that. Okay, so why would the top Democrat on the House Financial Services Committee, I'm talking about Maxine Waters, work for a year on a bipartisan bill that was looking to regulate, to promote, to help guide, I think, people using stablecoins, and then suddenly turn around and go, actually, we're not interested anymore? Brian, what happened?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the answer is orders from above. So I will say, during my year as controller of the currency in the U.S., I worked very closely with Chairwoman Waters, and I found her to be very smart, very hardworking, and she understood the issues. The about face is just that. It's an about face. And the rumors that people hear are that the White House threatened to veto the bill. So the real question is not why did Chairwoman or former Chairwoman Waters abandon ship? The real question is, why is the administration so opposed to all of this? And I think there are a couple of clues. One is, it's quite clear that this administration believes that the future of the dollar is central bank digital currencies. This is a whole nother show that you and I have talked about before. We can talk about again. But central bank digital currencies do compete with private stablecoins because they're issued and cleared by the Federal Reserve. There are issues why one wouldn't want those kinds of assets to be the dominant asset. But right now there's a competition going on. And the second thing is, stablecoins sit on top of blockchains. And for whatever reason, the administration doesn't seem to be excited about blockchains because they're permissionless, they're private, and they're not controlled by the government in the same way that the current banking and payment system is. And I think that scares some regulatory officials. So we have to get over that hurdle. There clearly are a number of Democrats who've already done that. The bill in the House that passed 2 weeks ago out of a committee did have some Democratic support, but I think the leadership at the moment is opposed for the reasons I've just said.